Hi, I'm Thea. Everyone said I was crazy when I opened the first restaurant in a desolate Miami warehouse district. Now the whole world knows that as Wynwood. Then I did it again in Alapata. Ever wonder how a place goes from not to hot? Join me for a behind-the-scenes look at what really goes into igniting a neighborhood. We'll talk with the risk takers, the pioneers, the restaurateurs, the real sparks of neighborhood ignition. This is Thea's Neighborhood Magic. Welcome to Thea's Neighborhood Magic. In this episode, I talk with Manny Diaz, who was the mayor of Miami from 2001 to 2009, Miami's most transformative period. We'll talk about how important it is for the city's entrepreneurs and government to work together as we look back on this seminal moment in Miami's history. I'm very excited to welcome Manny Diaz, former mayor of Miami. Manny, thanks a lot for being here.
Thank you, Thea.
I've been speaking with a few of the pioneers that made the magic that made Wynwood. But the success of Wynwood didn't happen in a vacuum. It happened during Miami's most transformative and dynamic moment, a moment I've always thought of as the Manny Diaz moment. So it's really exciting to have you here because I would love for you to give us some context about the city you inherited when you took office in 2001. What was Miami like?
It was a mess. Everything that could be wrong in Miami was wrong. We continued with the reputation of being the drug capital, riot capital. People don't realize, before Ferguson, before all the, police shootings that we've seen over the course of the last, couple of decades, in the 1980s, we had four. We had four major riots related to shootings.
And in Wynwood.
And in Wynwood, that's right.
Right.
And so we were the riot capital. 2 months after my election, the 2000 census came out, declaring or finding that Miami was the poorest large city in America.
I don't think a lot of people understood how poor, number one, in drugs and homicide. We'd had police shootings, which we're going to get to.
Right.
By the end of your second term, which was in 2008, just to give some context, you had employment full
employment, yeah.
You had the lowest millage rate in the country.
Right. We lowered taxes like 20-25%.
You had reserves. Mm-hmm. You had made the cleanest city in America.
Right. I was very proud of that.
So I want to get into it a little bit with you because it's an amazing opportunity for me. Mm-hmm. You grew up in Miami and you had this amazing vision for Miami.
Right.
What did you think Miami should be when you took office? You had formulated some idea that Miami should be something.
Yeah, vision is an interesting thing. Well, first of all, you have to have big ideas. And I'm a big ideas person. In fact, sometimes I get accused of being too big a thinker. But what people don't realize is that big ideas are made from a lot of smaller ideas.
Fixing a pothole and planting a tree.
Right.
I've read your book 3 times.
There you go. So you got you 3 times. Okay, it's more than I have. So you got that right. And so and I tell people, say, well, what do you mean by that? I said, well, when I was a little boy, there was a young president who said we're going to land on the moon in 10 years, right? And everybody looked at him and said, what's he talking about? He's crazy. And I'm sure that he sat there in the Oval Office or wherever he did the press conference thinking to himself, how exactly are we going to do that, right? And so for me, it's the same thing. There were a lot of things that I said, here's what we're going to do, here's what we're going to get to. And I had no idea how we were going to get there. Affordable housing, for example, our portfolio when I got elected, the total citywide portfolio were 3 units.
Of affordable housing.
Of affordable housing, $300,000. It's like
3 units.
3 units. That's it. We were doing 3 units.
That doesn't represent.
And so I stood during a State of the City and announced that we were going to hit $1 billion by the end of the decade.
So what I also love.
That was my vision. I didn't know how we were going to get there.
What I love about your book, which I'm going to get to, but what I love about your ideas and what you did. I find it hard to talk about art or anything like that when children aren't taken care of and the schools aren't improved and the parks aren't improved and seniors don't have somewhere to, go and are vulnerable our homeless people didn't have shelter. And so you took care of everything and kind of uplifted everything simultaneously.
All human beings.
And so I had this funny thought, and I've thought these things for so long, which I'm so thrilled to talk to you now. But of your first day in office, kind of making your to-do list, and you're writing, fix everything. Rebuild police department.
Right.
Check.
Check.
So I'd like to know how you managed to accomplish so much. I know you put the most spectacular leaders, Rudy Crew, Alberto Carvalho. You had an amazing team. But how did you accomplish so much?
I think first and foremost, people have to believe in your vision. I mean, you have to, and like I said, you have to have a big idea, and you have to bring, that's what a leader does. You have to bring people to that idea and have them own it, believe in it, fight for it. And that's what we did. And there's and you never stop, and it always starts, it always evolves. I mean, if you read the book, you remember how we started the whole anti-poverty program on the basis of a program called Earned Income Tax Credit, right? Which was brought to me by my staff person, and I had no clue what it was. All I knew is that we're the poorest large city. How in the world do we fix this, right? And of course, the media wants you to fix it in 60 seconds or less. And so, the Earned Income Tax Credit, I said, boy, that sounds like a great start. So we start with that. And then I realized that people with a certain number of family members who make less than a certain number can get a refund of $5,000 a year. And it's like, my God, why isn't everybody doing this? Why aren't there other mayors pushing this?
So, Manny, I think you knew better than anybody the importance of the relation of the city to the urban core and how much cities need revitalized neighborhoods. Could you speak a little bit about the health of the urban core in relation to the city and the county at large?
Yeah, I think you start with the name, right? The name is Miami. And as much as people have tried to call it Miami-Dade, for example, one of the mayors actually put that issue on the ballot for voters to vote. When you leave here, in fact, people that I know from up north think that, like, Pembroke Pines is part of Miami, you know what I mean?
No, they think South Beach is everything.
So if your urban core, if Miami, the city, is a disaster, so is Coral Gables, right? So is Miami Shores. So are all the other municipalities in the area. So is Miami-Dade County, for that matter, that may be doing well, but they're dragged down because the name is Miami. Are you going down to Miami? Well, they could be going to Miami Beach, for that matter, right? But it's like, no, you're going down to Miami. Oh, it's not safe. Oh, there's homeless people all over the place. Oh, there's this, there's that. All the horrors that Coral Gables has nothing to do with. Right.
And it was funny because it was much harder for me to get people from Coral Gables into Wynwood than it was to get someone from Tokyo.
Right.
Because they didn't understand Wynwood had been riots and we could never lose that kind of connection.
I remember trying to convince Ella Cisneros to move her place from Coral Gables into Wynwood.
Took a while.
Yeah. But I'm relentless.
No, and they thought it was lunacy.
Right.
You created the perfect environment for all of us urban entrepreneur pioneers. I still don't know what you did that made that so good, where everyone either helped us and supported us or just got out of our way so we could kind of make the magic that, we make. What did you do? And what should other cities be doing in order to do that and support their urban pioneers?
Well, I think, like the first thing is the vision and the trust, building trust. I had been around politicians all my life, right? And I saw that, not to demean them or anything, but there's so many of them were just in it for personal reasons. And I don't mean necessarily corrupt, like taking money or anything like that. I just mean just for personal pleasure,
benefit,
personal interest versus the public interest. That's it. And so what does that bring? Photo ops. I remember, I relate the story in the book when I first went to George Paris and said, George, we've been friends for a long time. Can we get some of your projects built in the city? And he said to me, Manny, I wouldn't build a duplex in the city of Miami. Well, he ended up building more condos than anybody else. But it's getting past that skepticism. Midtown, when I first spoke to
Joe Carey.
Joe, but before I even got to Joe, I had gone to George and a number of other developers locally. Say 56 acres in Miami for $35 million. I think it was.
Let's just set that up a little bit, because it's 56 acres that was a whole, right?
Right.
Wynwood was west of that. You had Biscayne Boulevard and just another moonscape right between us all. So if you hadn't taken it upon yourself to make that deal happen, to make sure Midtown took off, it was very unlikely that the design district, Wynwood, and everything else surrounding could have had such liftoff.
Right, and we went the extra mile. One of the things that people may not know is that by the time we got to Joe and his group from New York to build Midtown, we had actually master planned the site, because little knowledge is scary, and had enough knowledge to know that if Midtown became suburban, Kmart's and Walmart's with 1,000 surface parking lots,
anchor,
right? Yeah, but so you have nothing but like a few anchor stores and a whole bunch of parking. And or if somebody decided to do a residential project and wall it in, right? None of that would spill over into the adjoining neighborhoods. You would have a better place. You wouldn't have the desolate, 56 acres, but it was not a place that connected neighborhoods.
You'd have a suburban mall in the middle of the city that would have killed everything around it. So you did create this incredible atmosphere of public service and collaboration, and we all felt it so much. Of course, we don't know what you were doing, that you made it trickle down from your level all the way through to the people at the city that we would just, go see. And it's been a common theme throughout this show, how helpful the city was. How did you make that trickle down?
I came from the private sector, and one of the first things that I did is I hired, a couple of individuals, one out of the private sector. And what I was doing is I was hiring my staff, was getting them to commit for 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, as much as they want to give me, because I know that they were all doing well outside in the private sector. And they were going to have to sacrifice along with me. But I appealed to that interest and appealed to also, look, if you want to be practical about it, if we build a great city and we're still young, we're all going to benefit from that. So what you're doing is you're really making an investment, a short-term investment that I think will generate great returns for you, because you're going to have so much real estate to work on, when you leave, when after you give me your 2 or 3 years, that you'll make it up and then some. You
did have the finest people around you. I
They
mean,
were terrific.
It was stunning. We were going up in the world. It was amazing.
The funny thing was that a lot of people, especially my staff, they were mostly 20-somethings, and a lot of people said to me, "You're gonna fail, because these 20-somethings don't have enough experience. Period. Certainly not enough." Government experience. And I said, well, it's that institutional history that created the mess that we're in today.
And the cruise control.
I don't want people like, I don't want to hire people that are going to take a job so that 30 years from now they get a pension.
It was very exciting. Like, the energy in your team was just palpable. I don't know whether Robin ever saw you or how, but you were so busy. You were at everything. You were at our opening. You were at Thea's. I want to spend a little time on the book, because maybe I'm the biggest fan of the book. It's called Miami Transformed, Rebuilding America One Neighborhood at a Time. And I want to put it on the record that anybody who thinks they understand Miami really doesn't until you read this book, because you lay out all the component parts in Miami, and you set in motion all the amazing things that we get to benefit from today. Everything that you see, this city that is a major player on the world stage, you set that up. And I would really like you to explain how not only Midtown, not only Wynwood were you integral to, not only the design district, but multiple other projects throughout the city that didn't have one when you started. The Miami World Center.
Yeah, how about that?
Symphony Hall, Opera House, the River Art Walk, the Port Tunnel, Museum Park, Midtown. All of these projects happened.
Yes.
And you were integral to making them all happen.
Some are still happening.
What did I leave off? What did I leave off the list?
God, let's see.
And what didn't you get to, Manny? Like, what was on the list that you were a busy guy, but is there something that you look back and you think, wow, I didn't fit that one in? Anything?
I can't remember. I don't remember having something that I wanted to do and never started. Like, for example, right now, 395 is being rebuilt with the Signature Bridge and the underdeck. That was one of my babies. And we started that in 2002 or 3.
The underline.
Yeah.
Right.
And it's still, it's there. It's finally happening. But the other interesting thing was that, a lot of these projects actually started. Some of them, the tunnel started in the 1980s.
So the arc in Miami is extraordinarily long. We've talked about that. To be able to do anything, to get anything done, it's stunning how you managed to get so much done. But I cannot stress enough that I really think that, this kind of glorious moment that we're having right now was all set up when you began in 2001 and through 2008. And I think everyone should read your book to understand that.
Great. You have to be relentless. I mean, people. I always knew the potential that Miami had because so many of us, 60% of our residents are foreign-born, and I mean foreign, like in a foreign country, not in like New York City or north of Flagler, as I like to say.
Our new foreigners, yeah.
And so there is that energy that exists here, and I don't mean just people who came over from an island, like me. I mean. People who... I
came from an island too, a little one, though.
Oh, yeah?
Okay. England.
Yeah. Actually, Miami was the only city that had a mayor and a chief of police who both arrived in the United States in 1961 and both came from an island.
So that is...
Ireland and
That's
Cuba.
the perfect segue because I really want to talk about Chief of Police John Timoney.
The best.
The best... maybe one of the greatest police chiefs in the history of America.
Absolutely.
You went out and you brought John Timoney to the city. And you did that because our police department was shooting people.
Oh, it's the Keystone Cops.
How many cops were on trial as you came into office?
I think a dozen.
Corruption, trigger happy. You went out and persuaded the greatest police chief to come and take care of our city. How did you get John? How did you get him?
One night, he flew. He didn't want to come to Miami.
He wanted to go to L.A.
Yes.
Or private security. I mean, he was
in private security. But I mean, even for the interview, people said to me, he's not going to come here. He's John Timoney. Why would he want to be?
He'd been the police chief in New York City, in Philadelphia. He'd fought the mafia. He was a very, very well-known police chief.
And I said, well, we won't know until we ask, right? So we asked. And then he later confessed to me the only reason he came down for the interview is because this was, I think, February or something. It was like 30 degrees below in New York.
So he just wanted some warmth.
I got a free vacation for a weekend.
Whatever, you got him.
And then we sat there and, I obviously did my research. I knew he was an avid rower. So we met upstairs in my terrace outside the mayor's office. And I sat him strategically so that he would look out at the bay and see all the boats and people and then we just had a great talk and we really hit it off. I remember asking him something like, look who you are today. Why would you want to come back and get that 3 a.m. call? He goes, because I'm a cop.
So
that was it. That's all. That's who I am.
You brought a chief of police who I don't think he carried a weapon. I remember conversations with him where I don't think he carried a weapon. We went from disaster, cops shooting at people, to his first 20 months where not one shot was fired. by a
discharge
cop.
And then we did it again for 12 months and 10 months.
He did not want his cops shooting anyone.
He didn't want his cops getting into trouble. They were all like his family. And that's something that I admired. Because in his conversations or lectures with them or, seminars or presentations, I always heard him say, my job is to keep you out of trouble. I want you to do your job, and I'm going to make sure that you don't get in trouble.
He was such a sophisticated and strategic thinker and highly educated.
Brilliant.
And he was brilliant.
Okay.
So I'm going to connect a few dots. I've said this forever. Wynwood would not have happened so rapidly by any means if you hadn't brought John Timoney. And I'm going to connect some dots. I was the first operator in Wynwood standing there day and night with an open door and cash register. And if John Timoney hadn't been so personally involved and dedicated to the health of this small art district we were trying to launch, and so dedicated to me and making sure that that operation was safe, I never would have stood there. He did something so smart. He said, Thea, I'm going to take the cops out of the cars so they're not distracted. And I'm going to put them on horseback so that you will see them and that everyone in that desolate street would hear them coming. And we had this really funny moment. We laughed so hard because we were pioneering. I mean, anybody who was there was kind of pioneering. And it was so quiet. You could kind of imagine tumbleweeds coming down. And they would come down, clippity-clopping. I was like only missing like the long dress and waving the hanky. But it was pioneering. It was, right. He was an absolute genius. And again, I don't think Wynwood would have ignited if I hadn't felt safe enough to run that first operation. Sure. So, I wanted to include John Timoney in this.
Absolutely. I just got back from New York, and it amazes me still to this day how many people in the circles that I meet, have meetings and the like up there, it's like, oh, you're the guy that hired John Timoney. Yeah.
That's a good way to be known,
to this day.
that you got John Timoney.
And I used to travel with him to Philly because we were both members of a board at UPenn. And whether we were at the train station or wherever, hey, chief, hey, commissioner, up there he was commissioner, hey, commissioner, how are you? And he used to look at me and goes, it's been like 10 years.
He was huge.
Since I was here.
Huge. I miss him a lot. Your chemistry was amazing. It made it a lot of fun.
Well, you know what? Let me just say something, because when you talk about getting people to do things and the like, knowing that the mayor had his back 150% helps. And when we use him as an example, but that's true for everybody that was in that organization. They all knew I had their back, and that's important because that's true in business too, right?
You could sense that camaraderie and loyalty. It was amazing to be around you all. We were all kind of swept up in that energy and that dynamism. It was an amazing time in this city because of you and what you did, and John. John did something else that was really maybe the biggest honor in my life. He brought Tom Wolfe and his family.
Oh, yeah, sure.
Wow.
Was that something?
So getting to be the Wolfe family tour guide.
Right.
We got to do that. I have this kind of surreal memory of showing Tom and his wife Sheila and Alexandra around the quiet warehouse district at night. And he was, of course, writing his amazing novel, Back to Blood. And I thought, I'm going to wake up from this. This is just nuts. And then he did this incredibly gracious thing of including us in the acknowledgements, which I haven't quite framed it, but that's cool. How I feel about it, to be in that Tom Wolfe's final book.
By the way, the whole time, Vice President Biden was trying to sneer Timoney away from me.
Oh, he was?
And he wouldn't. Said, no, I made a commitment to the mayor to stay. How's that?
He was loyal.
Yeah.
He was absolutely amazing. Manny, while you're here, I don't want you to go before you give some advice to other cities and about how they could nurture their urban pioneers, what they could do to ignite their cause. What do you think that they should be doing to revitalize these urban city centers? Let the urban magic makers do what they do best. How did they connect? Any advice?
I don't think in our case, Winwood, Manny Diaz partnership would have been successful if we communicated via text.
So true.
And through social media.
We saw each other. We all saw each other.
I mean, so many of the things that I did were things that I learned by knocking on doors, talking to people. Politicians don't do that anymore. I mean, it's all, first of all, polls have gotten ridiculous. I mean, polls were around, obviously, when I was running, but they're so expensive. You do a poll, maybe at the beginning, and then you do a poll at the end to see how things are going, or maybe one in the middle. But now you can, electronically, you can do polls every week. And so there's a over-reliance on these polls as opposed to actually going out and talking to people on the street and finding out what they're thinking.
It's funny that we still have that kind of, personal interaction even then, that you're sitting here right now with me. So I need to know, when you drive around the city and you see this incredible city that's this major player on the world stage, you took it from this kind of small town. Now it's this. You must feel so proud, Manny.
Yeah, I do, but I come from a sports background when I was younger, and I've always been a believer in never getting overly excited about success or overly down about failure, because they're both going to happen.
How do you handle any failure?
Well, you figure out what you did wrong and fix it, right?
And how do you stay cool and kind of manage those bad feelings? Is it something that's changed in you?
No, it's just, look, I mean, even LeBron James has an off night, right? And so he doesn't think about, I only scored 5 points today. He's thinking about, what did I do wrong so I can go back to my usual 20, 30 points a game. And then there's the next game. You can't let, any one game hold you back, because you know what you're doing. You just have to get it. You had a bad day. Things didn't work out. Next game will be better. And so that's how you maintain that even disposition of knowing that there's another day tomorrow, and you don't quit, because you have to. Obviously, you do have to be the eternal optimist. That you believe in yourself, and that you believe you're going to get these things done, and that while others may think you're crazy, you keep pushing.
I remember you having a lot of detractors. You were too ambitious. Mm-hmm. You were too big picture. You were always very elegant in your responses and very smooth, Manny. How did you stay so smooth and not get sucked into all the provocation? I'm still learning this.
Because you recognize that they're not mutually exclusive.
What do you mean?
I mean, well, you have to have big dreams. I mean, you have a dream of going to the moon, right? I'm always looking for the go to the moon moment as a mayor or whatever else I do. And so you realize that, okay, you say that we're going to go to the moon, but it's not just like, it just doesn't happen. There are so many things that have to happen before you're even in a position to even try that, right? And each of those is a small step, right? As they said when they landed in the moon, a small step, right? And that's what people don't understand. They just think you say, we're going to have $1 billion in affordable housing. Yes. How do you get there? Or we're going to take our school systems from a D-rated school to a B-rated school. How do you get there? I mean, there's a lot of stuff that has to happen, and a lot of small things that come together so that you can achieve that goal. I mean, the goal is you want to win the World Series. You want to be NBA champs. That's the goal. But it starts with that first day you go to practice. Those are small things. Shooting 1,000 foul shots in practice every day. Those are small things. Getting to the NBA final is what you see at the end. And you think, see, he's always thinking this big thing about he wants to be the best. Yes, I want to be the best. But I also realize that to be the best, there are a lot of small things that maybe you never thought of doing so you could be the best.
So you stayed very cool with them because you knew you were going to go for it and you were going to win.
Absolutely. And, surround yourself with the right people. Work harder than everybody else. I mean, you're right. I mean, I was relentless on when people start getting emails and calls from me on Saturdays and Sundays about this, that, or the other. Hey, where are we on this? They'd be like, "Oh, he's serious."
You never stopped.
No.
It felt like you were in 3 places at once, and if you weren't there, you had a representative there. I don't think we had a Wynwood Arts District Association meeting without one of your people
Absolutely.
there, Susanna on the phone, whoever
Right.
it was. You had the most Loctite, spectacular team of people dedicated to public service, energized, excited.
Mm-hmm. And by the way, over 8 years, I had 4 chiefs of staff. Two Democrats and 2 Republicans.
And the best school superintendents.
And the best school superintendent. But my point is, because what's partisan about creating an arts district? I mean, it's not a Democratic thing or a Republican thing. Art has been around
totally
before there was a Democratic or Republican Party. God almighty, I mean, why don't we focus on
culture and arts, and that's what you did.
Not as a party thing.
Manny, as we wrap up, what would you wish for Miami's future?
We can never, when you're governing, you can never lose sight. You can never lose sight of all of your residents.
I love that.
Expand. You do great things, and great people now want to live here and have invested and moved, but there are a lot of people who aren't going to be as lucky. There are other Manny Diaz's who are 6-year-olds in Miami today. That child has to be given the opportunities I was given, so that there is a Miami of tomorrow that is worthy of where it should be. Thank you, Manny Diaz. Thank you. You're the best mayor Miami ever had, and I'm so happy that you came today. My mother agrees with you. Thank you so much for being here, Manny. Thanks. Thank you. This episode was recorded at Wynwood Podcasting and produced by my friend Adrian Olivares. This episode is dedicated to Adrian's loving memory.